In the past few seconds, each and every one of you already made 7 impressions about me. You picked up some visible elements, such as my gender, my skin color, my age, and then you drew many conclusions about non-visible elements, such as my nationality, my socio-economical background, my preferences. This is normal. This happens every time we meet someone new. We draw conclusions and make assumptions. These assumptions then have an influence on our behaviors to others. This is what we're going to talk about today. I'm Sonia Studer, Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion. I'm German, Algerian, and Swiss, so maybe you were right before, maybe not. And very happy to be with you. Today we're going to talk about 3 things. We're going to talk about differences. We're going to talk about what are some of the barriers for us to accept differences, which are the biases, conscious and unconscious. And we're going to talk about the behavior, so the inclusion, and how we leverage those differences. We all have assumptions when we are in the workplace. And I'd like to invite you to reflect on some of the assumptions that you may have in the workplace. At Nestlé, we want to value everyone, and we are guided by our values being respect for oneself, respect for others, respect for diversity, and respect for the future. And when we talk about respect for diversity, we mean respect for other ways of thinking, all facets of society, other cultures, and this in all our interaction with others in an inclusive way. So diversity and inclusion, it's not something on top, it's not a new program, it's something that is part of the Nestlé culture and that will help us to deliver as well our business performance. Diversity means everything that makes us different from each other, visible, but as well non-visible elements. What we want in the end is enable us to think differently and to reach this diverse thinking. Inclusion is very important because inclusion is what will make the diversity work. Inclusion, it's about making sure that we leverage that diversity, that we look at it from a curious perspective, and that we make the most out of the diversity. Very often when we meet a person for the first time, as I already introduced it, we think of elements that are at the top of the iceberg. But when we talk about, or when we meet a person that maybe looks like us, we wouldn't think that there are so many differences. And all these differences, you can see them here, are rooted underneath the top of the iceberg. It's the education, the preferences, the family status, the life experience. And it's only when sometimes we work with people on a project and at the end there is a bit of a clash that we realize, oh, but I think, yes, there are differences that we didn't think about. So what if we could think about it consciously when we meet a new person or when we work with a person, that there are many things that we may have in common, but that makes us different as well from one to another. And here we see its work style, it's the different personality profiles, and many more. So when we talk about difference, as I mentioned, we're talking a bit about us, because we see the world with our own glasses, with our own filter. And how are these made? These are made by the way we've grown up, the education, the different people we encountered, whether we traveled or not. This makes us have a certain style of lenses with which we see the world. So why is diversity and inclusion important? Our new CEO did last week an interview, and he said there are 2 things, or 2 reasons why it's important. It's the right thing to do, linked to our values and linked to our purpose. And the second one, it's because it has a business impact, because we sell a product to the world, to the globe. So we need as well to be inclusive to the world and to the globe. And this is what we're going to see.
It's a great opportunity to give my full support to diversity and inclusion efforts at Nestlé, which I consider to be really important. When we think about diversity and inclusion, let's think about two levels here. One thing is, from a moral, ethical point of view, it is simply right, okay? This is in line with our purpose and values. This is in line with who we are. And in a day and age when separatism and hate and building walls and all this other stuff is in fashion again, I think it's more important than ever that we stick to our values. I think there's also a business purpose. And the business purpose is, if we sell our products around the globe, if we're present around the globe, we need to be inclusive around the globe. We need to be sure that we hire top talent from everywhere, and that these people feel at home with us, and that basically together we form a productive one, and that we connect with our customers around the globe at all levels. And that we can only do if we really have bandwidth. And bandwidth means basically have everyone represented in our company.
Diversity and inclusion impacts on three things. It impacts on innovation, the way we think, on society, the way we act and interact with our different stakeholders, and on culture, the way we work together. And we know, not sure you can see it, but that diverse and inclusive companies, when they are well managed and well led, are more performant. So we know as well that they're more performant. Why? Because they're more innovative. We know that if we have people who think differently, there is a complementarity of thinking, not always easy to manage, but that will lead to more creativity. Another element is the one around the fact that if we have different perspectives, we better understand or better able to understand a new market or the different aspects of a society. The third element is we know that when the company culture is diverse and inclusive, the level of engagement and motivation of employee is higher. So this is why at Nestlé, the way we want to drive diversity and inclusion, it's around innovation, so thinking about the diversity of our consumers. It's act and engage with our society and different stakeholders in an inclusive way. And it's to leverage and make the most out of the diversity we have in our employees. So, when we talk about innovation, what is it? It's to think of potential opportunities or additional ones when we think of diversity in terms of our product, the services, the way we communicate. And I give you an example. I was at an event a year ago with my son, who's 6 years old, and my father, who's 80. And both of me came because they bought a bottle of water, a small one, and they both came to see me because they were not able to open it. So for my son, it was really nice to come and see me, can you help me? But for my father, it was less, because he was showing a weakness. He could not open, he didn't have the force. Now, we as a company have bottles as well that have a different opening, that you can open, for instance, with a mouth. If you think of people with disability, where you can not do it with both hands, but only with one. So it's things like this that we can as well leverage or think about when looking at the different packaging, etc. So here's an element. I'd like to share with you an example of the communication as well, because as a company we can say we are diverse and inclusive, but somehow we will be valued and talked about by and through our product and the way we communicate around it. So there is a company called Mattel. For those of you who don't know it, they produce dolls. When I grew up, they didn't look like this. They used to be blonde with blue eyes. But the world is not just with blonde and blue eyes. So they have adapted their range, right? So that you don't only buy the blonde with blue eyes, but maybe a second one. And then they realized, we need to adapt again. So you maybe buy a third one. So there is an element of willing to reflect the society we're living in. And they build their whole communication around the world is possible, and we want to make sure that you connect to the different things that you buy or you play with. From a consumer perspective, but as well from a stakeholder and partner perspective. We want to be connected when it comes to building relationship to our local community around the sites, when we can exchange with our different partners. And very often, we have in mind the partners or the customer that we know. And sometimes we are not willing or not open enough to look at the ones that are coming, and that the ones that afterwards will come, because it's a change. So we have to as well make sure that we foresee all these changes in what is coming. So here as well, what we're doing as a company is we are connected through the different, in terms of society, with the Nestlé in Society report, where we have commitments towards the society and concretely illustrate them as well. And you see it here for individuals and family, for communities, and for the planet. Now, looking at the impact that diversity and inclusion have on our culture, it's the way we work together. But it starts with who do we attract? And then who do we retain? And we'll see later on, we all have preferences. How does our work environment reflect the reality we're living in? What is the flexibility we're giving to our employees and to whom? The accessibility, thinking of our sites, is it accessible to people with different abilities? And then who do we develop? Is it always maybe the extrovert, the one raising more the voice? All things that we may be already doing, but that we can question ourselves. As employees, as leaders, this is something that we can constantly ask ourselves and challenge ourselves. And we have that responsibility as a leader. So this is why, as an example, we started last week a series of conferences called Leading Together. Because these here are all themes that concerns everyone working together in one place. Different generation, different cultures, different ideas. And to make it all work, well, we need to have conversation, because we will not maybe all agree. But I think it's fine to then debate and open and share the conversation.